Hi everyone, thanks for joining today. So as was mentioned there today, we'll be going through keeping your database clean. The areas that I'll go through is cleaning up your existing database, and then I'll come on to some prevention techniques for making sure that going forward your database is kept clean once you've kind of cleaned it up. And then we'll have some time for some questions at the end. So just as a kind of introduction in terms of why it's important to keep your database clean, it's quite important for your searching, because it just means that your searches will be much more effective. It also means your database isn't clogged up with unhelpful data, and it will end up streamlining your processes. Really what it boils down to is that the better your database is and your cleanliness of your database, then the better your searches will be to shortlist and then have more successful placement. So really it's a snowball effect, which is useful and good. So hopefully everyone can see my screen. I'll just check, make sure. Perfect. I just wanted to make sure that it was all working and everything. And just to let everyone know as well that this session is being recorded. So I think that afterwards it will be sent out, and we'll come to questions later. Brilliant. So one thing that's really important, and just to mention, so at the moment I am logged into my test system. So sometimes other people on the test system do log some test records. So there might be some with some interesting names. But basically, what I'll show you now is one thing that's really important, and I'll show you on the contact list. But this is important on your candidates as well, is to look for any records that you might have that don't have an email address and don't have a phone number, because if you've got records that don't have any way of actually contacting them, then even though they might be the perfect candidate for a role, they might be a great contact, on paper, you've got no way of actually getting in contact with them. So at that point, you either want to clear up those in terms of update that information, or remove them from the system. Either way, whatever you feel is best. So I'm just going to clear my current search at the moment. Actually, I'm going to filter it by my contacts. What I would recommend normally is to clear your filters, but I'm just going to keep mine so it's just my contacts at the moment. But if I hit on search and go to additional criteria, then actually I'm going to start with the email address first. Email, work primary email address. Now, one thing to bear in mind is because this is a test system, this is the name that we have for our email field, or email one field. You might have something different, so just bear in mind your field you're searching might be called something different. Now, what I would recommend doing here is excluding saving that middle column to exclude. And then what you can do is, if we just add the @ symbol and then a wildcard, actually I'll do it the other way around. So if we do the wildcard symbol and then @ and then select, what this will do is, if I were to hit search, this would filter out any record that you have where in the work or primary email field, where it's got anything where it's got an @ symbol. I would recommend doing it this way, because another thing that you can do is you could do sort of do it by letters, and you could do A and select E and so on. The thing with this is, potentially what you may have on the system is, especially if you've got the email as a required field, you may have maybe someone's put NA, or they've put no email or something like that. So even if you exclude people that have A and E or IOU, whatever you put in there, you might exclude people that actually don't have an email. So if you do it by the @ signal or symbol, sorry, if you use the @ symbol, then it just means that anyone that doesn't have an email in an email format is brought back, and anyone that does is excluded. So that's one way of searching for your candidates or your contacts that don't have an email address. Now, another thing that you can do is, obviously email is important, but also the phone number. So again, this might be a different name on the field, but if we change that to exclude, then on here, what I would recommend is just going through 0 to 9. So again, do the wildcard, and you would go on 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 9. And then what would happen is any record that you have which doesn't have a numerical value in the direct phone field, any record that maybe has NA, maybe is blank, has something that's not a number, will be brought back. Any record that you have that has a number in it, then they will be excluded. So you know that you're just getting the ones that you need to clean up. With this, it's quite key to make sure that you've put them all in, and obviously you only need to go up to 9. What you can also do as well is, if you, because you might feel that, okay, it's fine if they've got a number or a email address, it's fine if they've got one of them, but we want to make sure that we're getting returned people that don't have an email and they don't have a number, because in that case, you've got no way of contacting them at all. So in that case, it's just if we do exclude and then the @ symbol. And then what this will do is this will exclude anyone that has, in this case, a number that has 0, 1 or 2 in it, and anyone that doesn't have a @ symbol in their email. Obviously in the real, when you do it normally, I would recommend doing 0 to 9. And so I'm just going to hit search here. This will say improper query just because of the way that my system's set up, just because it's a test system. But I will remove that. Search. Okay, perfect. So when you actually run that search and you've got your results back of people that don't have a number or they don't have an email address, then you will want to either update those fields or you will want to remove them. So if you want to update the fields, there are some fields on your system where you can do a mass update. Now, these are only certain fields, and email and number aren't included in that. The reason for that is you're not going to mass update everyone's emails to the same thing. Everyone's going to have something different, and the number as well. So what I would recommend doing is you can hover over your fields and you can use the inline edit tool. And then, so say, for example, with the phone number, if I just go to direct phone and then put in a number and then save, that will update. That is obviously a lot quicker than having to open each record one by one, go to the edit page, put in the number, put in the email, and then save, then come back to the list. This will save you so much time by going through using the inline edit tool. If any of you don't see the inline edit tool and you just have to hover over the right hand corner of the field and you'll see the grey box. If any of you don't see it, I would recommend contacting support and they will enable it for you. It's a user type enablement. So another thing as well that you might want to do is, as well as actually cleaning up some of the fields, you might want to clean up your database by looking for records that maybe are a little bit older on your system that you haven't had any contact with for a long time, and you might want to go through and clear them off your system. So in that case, what I would recommend is, again, going back to your additional criteria. And in here, depending on what you're personally wanting to search, a couple of things I would recommend is either searching the date added field, so looking for any records that maybe were added a very long time ago and many years ago. But because with that, what you might find is that, yes, someone was added years ago, but you're still talking to them and everything. So in that case, you may want to search by dates, date last modified. And then what you also potentially want might want to look at is date added within. So basically you either want to look at when the record was last modified, or maybe you want to search them by when the last note was added to the record, because really when someone's calling someone or contacting someone, they should be leaving notes onto the individual records for communication internally and making sure everyone's aware. So if you run that search, if someone hasn't had a note added for the last 2-3 years, you're probably not going to particularly use them, and they're not really an active candidate or an active contact on your system. So one thing to bear in mind with any date field, so whether it's the date last modified or the date the note was added, and actually, sorry, one thing to mention is some of you might see the advanced note searching and not have it. Again, that's something that support can enable for you. So just to mention that my test system, sorry, has it. Yours may not, but you can get that enabled. So I'll just hide that for the moment. But yes, with any date field, what you can do is, unlike with the fields like the email or the phone number, where we've got include all, include any, or exclude, because it's a date, you have a few different columns in this middle one, and one of them being after. So before, we might want to say. So we might want to bring back any record where the date it was last modified was December the 1st. So you can pick a specific date. You can also pick one date. So it was last modified on a date that's equals after a certain date within a time frame, or is between, and you can pick time frame. So you might want to search for any contact record, in my case on this system, that was last modified before the 1st of January, let's say 2017, because any record that was modified after that, we're saying, yeah, they're fine, they're active. Any ones that were last modified before that date, they haven't been worked on for 4 years now, so it's not a record you're really using. And then you would hit search. That's not brought any results, but again, like I mentioned, that's just because it's my test system and it's just using my few records that are there on the system. So when you've run that search, you might then think, okay, well, I don't want them on the system anymore. So you might be wondering whether to archive your records or to delete them. So if you want to archive a record, it's just a case of changing the record status. Again, you can do this en masse, and this is something that potentially, depending on your company setup, it might just be something your admin users can do. So if you're not able to mass update a status from the list view, that's something either you can ask support to give you the entitlement to, or internally you can ask the admin who makes those changes to do. But if you go to change status, and then you can change it to archive. Also, again, if you're an admin, you can mass delete. So you can mass delete your records. If you're wondering whether to delete or to archive your record, really, generally speaking, what we would say is to archive. The reason for that is, if you archive your records, they're still on your system, but they wouldn't show up in your list view, and they're not in the fast find unless you specifically search for them. And I'll show you how to do that in a moment. So in that case, say, for example, we archive this top one, which I'll do in a moment. If a few years later, or even a week later, you decide, actually, that person, I know they were on the system and I know we archived them, I want to bring them back, they should be a live candidate, it's quite easy to find them. If you delete them, technically we can find them and support can help you find them, but without some specifics to narrow down their search, like when it was deleted, their name or their email address, if you don't have that information, it's very hard to get them back. So archiving is a lot easier to bring them back, and it's something that you can get them back on your system. If you have a record where maybe they've passed in incorrectly, or they were never a proper record, they never became sort of a candidate or a contact, they just went on your system and never got used, then in that case, you might want to delete them. Really, it's internally how you decide it's best, but that's the sort of general best practice, I would say. So to archive a record, either when you open the record, you can change the status, or if you want to do it en masse, you can just change status and change to archive, which I've done there, so save. Then when you actually want to find your archived records, all you need to do is either in the additional criteria or in your column, just filter by archive. And then you'll see this is the one that I archived just now. So that's archived. Then what you can do is just change the status back to active. And then if I cancel that filter, clear that filter, then Jade Gebby's back there again. So that's the best way for archiving, and it just means that they are still on your system, and any notes that you've made, any emails that have been tracked are there. Great. So then the other thing that I just wanted to mention in terms of cleaning up the duplicate records before I go on to preventing duplicates kind of going forward, or you know, having an unclean database going forward. But the other thing that I just wanted to mention is merging records together. So you may find that you have some duplicate records on your system, and I'm just going to open my 2 contacts, and these 2 contacts we'll say are Jade Gebby and Jade Test. They are duplicates. Someone in my system, they didn't realize that they were the same person, so they have put them on accidentally, and then you realize, oh, okay, there's a duplicate. So in that case, the best thing to do is you can merge your records together. Again, if you don't have the ability, support can enable that. And the best thing to do is to decide which is the primary record, so which is the one that you want to keep. Really, it would be the one that you've done the most work on, probably the oldest one that has emails tracked, notes and things like that, but they will be merged over. Then all you need to do is just go to Actions and Merge Records, and then merge this record, and you'll notice underneath it says this record will be the primary record, and then just put in the ID number of, or the name, you can search by that, of the record that you want to merge with it. And you'll notice here, notes, ownership, files, profile data, activity will be moved to the record above, and this record, so that's Jade Test, will be deleted. One thing to bear in mind is, as it's got here, this action is irreversible. Are you sure you want to continue? So again, you might just want admins to have ability to do that. And then just hit merge. And that will merge them together, so that will just clean up some of your duplicates. And then if I actually go to this one and refresh it, you'll notice they've been deleted now. And if I refresh that, they'll be gone from that list. So that's cleaning up your system. Now to come on to some tips in terms of preventing a messy database going forward. One of the key things I would recommend is ensuring in your field mappings that you've got some required fields on the key fields on your records. So one thing that I often tell people is to find a good balance between having required fields but not having nearly every field required, because recruiters are really busy, you know, always got lots of things to do and everything. So if you've got loads of your fields required, then that's going to be frustrating, but it is important to have required fields. So a couple that I would recommend are the email field or the phone field. You might either, you could go for both, or you might want to go for one or the other, just so that there's some contact information that has to be saved. Also the postcode, that's quite important, because if you ever wanted to run a search and do a radius search, that works off of the postcode field. So that's just quite important for making sure that that search is accurate. Ultimately, it is up to you in terms of what you feel in your company is the most important fields to make sure are required, but I would definitely recommend doing that. So again, this is something that admins have the ability to do, but just to quickly show everyone who is an admin but maybe has never done it before, you just go to menu, admin, and field mappings, and then in here you select the entity that we're looking at. So we're looking at contacts at the moment, and you just have this column required, and it's just a case of ticking that box. When you tick it, and if you just scroll up and save, then when you log out and back in, for everyone, when you go to add a field, add a contact, sorry, or edit a contact, that field will have a little red dot, and when data's in there, it will turn to a green tick, and they can't save the record until that field's filled out. The other thing that you may find that I would recommend is when you're sorting out your database, if you notice that you've got some fields that are never used, barely anyone's put any data in, say you've got a good few thousand contact records or candidate records, and only 10 records have a specific field filled out, you may want to hide that field. So that's just this tick box here that says hidden. I won't hide that because that's the name, but that's how you would hide your field. And again, just save and log out and back in, and that will update. The reason that's important is it streamlines your process, it streamlines your records. It's better for recruiters and consultants when they're filling out and creating their records, or when they're editing the records. But also as well, it means if anyone suddenly decides to run a search on a field that's hardly ever used, they're not ultimately spending time looking at something that's not going to help them to shortlist candidates. And then they're just looking on fields that are being used and are important to you as a company. Then the other thing as well that's quite important to make sure that you have a good and clean database is just making sure to use the skills, categories, and industry fields. You may call them business sectors on your system. The reason that this is important is because, say, for example, if I go to add a candidate, and then you've got category, skills, and industries. If you have a job record on your system, the categories, the skills, and the industries all pull from the same list. So then if you're searching your candidates, say, for example, as you can see, it's test examples there, but say, for example, we put the category as accounting. If you have a job that has the category of the role is in accounting, you can just go to your candidate list and search on accounting. You might then want to specify that the location that they're in and make sure that they're available and narrow it down a bit more. But what you're going to find by using the categories, the skills, and the industries is that the results that you get from your searches, they're going to be more accurate for the role that you shortlist them for, and then in turn there's more likelihood that they'll get placed quicker and they'll be the right people for the role. So effectively it just speeds up that process, but in an accurate and effective way. What I would recommend doing, and this is a test system so it doesn't actually have it, but I would recommend at least making category, skills, or industries required. Really, skills would be a good one to make required, because it's things like, say it's a role in IT, things like HTML, and then you've specified on your job that one of the skills needed is HTML. That's going to, like I say, make your searches really effective. So I would recommend making one of those skills required, and really skills is a good one, but ultimately it's up to yourselves. And like I say, the reason that this is useful is the terminology on all those fields, whether you're on a candidate, a vacancy, or a contact, the terminology is the same across all those records. And then just quickly for anyone who's looking to add those, again, it's something that admins have access to. So just under categories in here, you can add your category and your skills get added under your category sections. So I think I've slightly, well, not overrun, but I wanted to make sure that there was some time for questions. So I'm going to throw over to Sarah just to see if there is some questions that have come come in.
Great, thank you, Jade. We did get a bunch of questions. I think we've got 2 minutes to go through a couple of them. Our first one is it possible to search candidates without an email or without a phone number in one search?
Oh, okay, yeah. So the search that I was showing before, where I added under the additional criteria, I added the email as one section and then the phone number underneath. So the way that the additional criteria logic works is while you're in the middle, so I'll just add a field. So while you can use the and or logic with include all or include any, if you add another field to search, that is and, so the system will look for, say before it was looking for work/primary emails excluding certain information, and also phone number excluding certain numbers. If you're looking to find or in the same, so you want either people without email addresses or people without phone numbers in the same search, what I would recommend doing is running the email one first, saving to a hot list, then running the phone one, again saving to a hot list, then the same hot list. You can add them all to the same hot list. And then in here, when you come to the additional criteria, if I just type in, oh, maybe it might be tear sheets, yeah, so hot list or tear sheets. Sorry, in the UK it would be tear sheet hot list, but in the US it's tear sheets. And then what you would do in here is you can select that field, select your tear sheet, and then hit search, and it will bring up those records. And then you can add any criteria you need to there.
Thank you. Let's do one more question, and then I think that's all we'll have time for. But our last question is, if we have thousands of records we need updating, can someone in Bullhorn do this for us?
Yes, so you can, if you've got, you know, loads of records and loads of different fields that need updating, then internally we can do that and do a cleanup. That would be through our professional services team, and that is a sort of paid for extra. Also, a couple of our partners like Kylo and Newbury do this as well. So you may want to decide whether it's something that you can do kind of internally with using these techniques. If not, then yes, if you contact support, they can speak to professional services and work on a quote and things for you, but it would be a paid for extra. One thing just to mention though, to make things easier, is if you run some of the searches that I mentioned and you do have a lot of records and you think that inline editing, even though it's quicker than opening the records, will still take a while, what you may want to do is save the search as a favorite. So you just go to say favorites, save search, I'll just call it test. You can make it public or private, so make it public, and you can share with some specific people. Then what you could do is you can ask your users that are available to do this to go in, run the same search, and then filter it by their contacts or their candidates, so each person can update their records, and it just sort of splits it out and shares it amongst people.
Great, thank you so much. So I'm going to end the webinar here, but as a reminder, we will be sharing the webinar recording with all attendees within the next 24 hours or so, and we'll also follow up via email in the next week for any of the questions that we didn't have time to cover in the Q&A, which was a handful of them. Our next webinar will focus on the mobile app and will be held in February. Invites will be sent out via email in the next couple weeks. And finally, for additional training resources, don't forget to log into the Learning Hub through the customer community at help.bullhorn.com. Thank you, everyone.